We have more news to get to tonight than it's possible to get in an hour. I'll start with a serious note as we get back from vacation and Labor Day. The future of the country is at stake, nothing that big. 63 days, it's all in your hands. A decision that could not be any more stark. America's at a crossroads right now. We'll explain all this tonight. Do we continue the path of economic success, peace through strength, the empowerment of the forgotten men and women? Or is your future going to be decided by a bunch of extreme far-left Democrats that want socialism, that want their crumbs back and raise your taxes, that want to preserve the bureaucratic status quo? Oh, yeah, and impeach your president, the one you voted for. Don't take my word for it. Coming up tonight, we have exclusive video of Democratic leader Chuck Schumer saying that the Democrats want to impeach Trump in 2019. Plus, we'll show you how other Senate Democrats, they absolutely were unhinged today at the Kavanaugh hearing, and they turned it into a circus. We'll also bring you breaking new developments. You won't get anywhere. Bruce Orr, Christopher Steele, and yes, a connection to Robert Mueller and Robert Mueller's pit bull, Andrew Weissman. In other words, it's like one big, long, incestuous chain of connections. And later we have a story that will make your blood boil. Infamous social justice warrior Colin Kaepernick is now the brand new face of a Nike ad campaign. So sit tight, buckle up. It's time for tonight's breaking news opening monologue. It's one of the most important decisions that a sitting president can make, and that is the nomination of a U.S. Supreme Court justice that can shape this country for generations and decades to come. And Senate hearings for Judge Kavanaugh are now underway. He is a strong constitutional candidate, an originalist, a long, serious, intellectual track record as a federal judge. He deserves a deliberate, robust hearing, but sadly, as we predicted on this show, Senate Democrats, they are making a mockery out of what is a very important process. In what is a coordinated show of political grandstanding, Democrats tried and failed to stall the hearing just seconds into the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Grassley's opening statement. We've got the videotape, and it gets worse. Take a look.
I welcome everyone to this confirmation hearing on the nomination of
Mr. Chairman.
Brett Kavanaugh.
Mr. Chairman.
To serve as Associate Justice.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recognized for a question before we proceed.
Regular order, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recognized to ask a question before we proceed. The committee received just last night, less than 15 hours ago, 42,000 pages of documents that we have not had an opportunity to review or read or analyze.
You're out of order. I'll proceed.
We cannot possibly move forward, Mr. Chairman.
I extend a very warm welcome to
We have not been given an opportunity to have a meaningful hearing on this nominee.
Their two daughters.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with my colleague, Senator Harris. Mr. Chairman, we received 42,000 documents that we haven't been able to review last night, and we believe this hearing should be postponed. I know this is an
exciting day for all of you here, Mr. Chairman, and you're rightly proud.
Mr. Chairman, if we cannot be recognized, I move to adjourn.
The American people.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Directly from Judge Kavanaugh later this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Now, this is what happened. 44 interruptions from Democrats, and make no mistake, as NBC News reports, this was all a coordinated effort from the Democrats. It has nothing to do with document requests. In an effort to be transparent, hundreds of thousands of Kavanaugh-related documents have all been provided to the Senate for review. Now, more than double the amount that was provided during the confirmation of Justice Elena Kagan. In fact, National Review pointed out more documents have been provided than the last 5 nominees to the Supreme Court combined. And still, these coordinated attempts to disrupt this hearing were bolstered by the Democrats' friends protesting in the audience. It was all staged. Even NBC News recognized that. Take a look.
Mr. Chairman, I therefore move to adjourn this hearing.
Okay.
This is a mockery and a travesty of justice. This is a travesty of justice. We will not go back. Cancel Brett Kavanaugh. Adjourn the hearing.
This being a Supreme Court confirmation hearing, my Democratic colleagues actually
We have said for a long period of time that we were going to proceed on this very day, and I think we ought to give the American people the opportunity to hear whether Judge Kavanaugh should be on the Supreme Court or not.
Well, now we learned from NBC News this had all been coordinated in a conference call that took place over the Labor Day holiday. Chucky Schumer led the call. At one point, the atmosphere in the hearing is so chaotic, so absolutely unhinged by the left, that Kavanaugh's daughters were rushed out of the room. Of course, these kinds of disruptive tactics, it's nothing new. Let's see, Sarah Sanders, Secretary Nielsen run out of restaurants, Ivanka Trump harassed on an airplane, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos chased down a street, Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi threatened with physical violence, just to name a few. One Republican senator even referred to the hearing as being overwhelmed by mob rule. This is what is at stake in 63 days. Take a look.
I haven't been in as many confirmation hearings as some of my colleagues, but this is the first confirmation hearing for a Supreme Court justice I've seen basically according to mob rule.
All of this over who is a well-qualified judge with an incredible, impeccable record. And remember, judges must be confirmed based on the Ginsburg standard, 1993. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's confirmation, making the case that no impartial judge should ever answer how they would rule on any hypothetical case ever. And instead, justices must be confirmed based on their merit, their background, their experience, and their education. Sadly, that's not going to stop the left's obstruction. Remember Democrats? Remember everything they did to obstruct a guy by the name of Robert Bork, nominated by Ronald Reagan. Now, he was never confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court in large part because of the fear-mongering, the outright lying and smearing from then Mr. Character himself, Senator Ted Chappaquiddick Kennedy. Remember the Chappaquiddick case? You might remember this.
Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions, blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters, rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight raids, and school children could not be taught about evolution. Writers and artists would be censured at the whim of government.
Just a total, complete liar. And what the Democrats did to Judge Bork was so egregious, it inspired a new term. It's called borking. Years later, borking was in full play during the confirmation hearings of now Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Remember back in 1991, Democrats do the same old routine. They rolled out a former colleague, Anita Hill, who made sexual harassment allegations against him. The process was so vicious, so nasty, so awful, Justice Thomas called it a high-tech lynching. Take a look.
This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
Wow. As we speak, the Democrats' all-out effort to bork Judge Kavanaugh, it's now in full swing. It's unfolding before your eyes. This time, Democrats can do little more than just interrupt hearings, play to their constituents ahead of midterm elections. And as you can see, the presidency of Donald Trump is literally causing the left wing in this country to become more unhinged every day. All common decency thrown to the wind, kids escorted from the hearing, and Democrats desperately trying to get back their power. This was all orchestrated. Now, we have warned you many times obstructing the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh is only one part of their agenda. Should they get back power in 63 days? They want open borders, eliminate ICE. They want to raise your taxes. They want their crumbs back. They want an end to all the investigations into their friends with the biggest abuse of power in our history, the deep state. They want to impeach the president. They want to keep Obamacare. And don't take my word for it. Let's listen to what the most powerful Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, was caught on tape saying over the weekend. Take a look at this.
Sooner the better. Sooner the better. That's not answering the question. You got to get a few
Well, as soon as we possibly can. Chuck Schumer had a pretty busy Labor Day weekend, too. He wasn't calling for Trump's impeachment. When he wasn't doing that on the streets of New York, well, let's see, he was with Nancy Pelosi. And according to Politico, well, they were having a fancy soiree in the beautiful Hamptons of Long Island, spotted with many in the Hollywood and media elite. Let's see, Oprah Winfrey, Georgie Stephanopoulos, Katie Couric, Joyless Behar, and so many others. Not a single smelly Walmart Trump supporter or an irredeemable deplorable or someone who clings to their God-gun Bibles and religion. Nobody in sight. How else do you celebrate a holiday for American workers? Out in the Hamptons with your favorite actors and so-called news hosts. I guess my invitation got lost in the mail. But in all seriousness, it just shows how incestuous members of the mainstream media, Hollywood, the Democrats really are. And let it be a clear warning. Democrats don't have any positive agenda to improve the lives for you, the American people, we smelly Walmart people. In less than 2 years, President Trump has ushered in a new era of success. Look at the side of your screen. 4 million new jobs, 4 million people off of food stamps, thousands of new manufacturing jobs, hundreds of thousands, jobs Obama said would never come back. Unemployment claims a 50-year low. But Pelosi, Schumer, every Democrat running for office in November, they want to risk it all because of their overwhelming hatred of the president and their desire for power. This obsessive desire to see Trump fail, shared by so many of their friends in news and the mainstream media, clearly acting as the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. We have shown you for months the media goes from crisis to crisis to crisis in what is their effort to take down the president you all elected. That is succeeding. You might remember some of these moments. Take a look.
Is there a difference if the president said, hole or house?
Do you think these countries are holes?
Donald Trump has turned the Oval Office into a hole.
Holers built this country 110 years ago.
In addition to the president's comments yesterday, a few more.
Whole countries.
Hole.
Hole. Hole. Hole. Hole. Whole country.
The White House briefing expected to begin any moment now. They will certainly face questions about Stormy Daniels.
The Stormy saga takes a dramatic turn as the porn star speaks out on her alleged affair with citizen Trump.
Stormy Daniels' lawyer.
We haven't heard from him about the Stormy Daniels affair.
Given the events of today, the likelihood of impeachment, I'm not saying it's high necessarily, but it certainly went up.
Impeachment.
Impeached. Impeachment. Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
The president is clearly guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors. He should resign his office or be impeached.
Tonight, we even have more obsessive coverage to bring you. A brand new book, Bob Woodward, filled with, let's see, speculation, rumors, hearsay, apparently hundreds of anonymous people, painting the Trump presidency in a very negative light. Many are flat out denying the claims made in the book. Let's see, including Defense Secretary Mattis, the Chief of Staff, John Kelly. Let's see, 8 stars between them. John Dowd, the attorney for the president, and many others. The mainstream media can't get enough. Obsession to obsession to issue to issue to issue, but never focus on success at all.
Bob Woodward's book, it's called Fear, Trump in the White House, paints a disturbing picture.
Legendary journalist Bob Woodward's new book about President Trump.
Bob Woodward's new book.
Bob Woodward.
Bob Woodward.
Bob Woodward.
It's a Bob Woodward book.
Woodward book, Bob Woodward.
Explosive new details about the Trump new White House today, uncovered by veteran journalist Bob Woodward.
Widely anticipated book, the product of Bob Woodward.
Woodward's book.
Bob Woodward.
Bob Woodward.
Bob Woodward.
Bob Woodward's book.
Woodward.
Woodward's book.
Woodward.
More on that blockbuster new reporting from Bob Woodward.
Bob Woodward's new book.
And while the abusively biased, predictable, crisis to crisis to crisis media runs with wall-to-wall coverage of a book filled with salacious rumors, anonymous sources, they're totally ignoring what is one of the biggest scandals in American political history, the biggest abuse of power. Tonight, the plot thickens around Bruce Orr and his efforts to spread Christopher Steele's Clinton bought and paid for phony, dirty Russian dossier throughout the entire highest levels of our government and lying to you, the American people. Catherine Herridge reporting not only did Orr maintain a close relationship with Steele, but he also fed Steele's dossier. Let's see, to Andrew Weissman. Remember, Weissman is Robert Mueller's top deputy. The New York Times called him Robert Mueller's pit bull, if you recall. And in the case against Anderson Accounting, remember Weissman's aggressive prosecution tactics, tens of thousands of your fellow Americans lost their jobs. A conviction overturned 9-0. It's hard to lose 9-0 in a Supreme Court. Weissman responsible for the imprisonment of 4 Merrill Lynch executives for a year. Oh, that was overturned too by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. He was excoriated by a judge for withholding exculpatory evidence. And you have Bruce Orr, once the 4th highest ranking official in the DOJ, feeding the dirty Russian dossier to the man that would then go on to be Mueller's pit bull. And remember the exchanges between Steele and Orr. Oh, I'm afraid. What if we're exposed? I hope the firewalls hold. Oh, and yeah, did the special counsel get your messages? So was Andrew Weissman colluding? Was he conspiring? Why didn't Robert Mueller tell the American people about the contacts with Orr and Christopher Steele? And why did we have to figure it out? Catherine Herridge did. And we also know that a recently unearthed handwritten note from Orr, written 2 weeks after the election, let's see, listed Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, another FBI agent. The note reads, no prosecution yet. Push the case ahead on M, which is Manafort. Go back to Chris, which is Steele. And that's what they believe all of this means. Manafort is M. Christopher Steele is Christopher Steele, at the center of the entire government case against what we're unfolding here. Well, of course, taxes and et cetera. Finally tonight, there is one sign the Mueller investigation could be drawing to a close. We'll talk to Jay Sekulow. According to a report from the New York Times, the special counsel will accept written answers from President Trump to some questions surrounding the Russia probe. We're going to ask President Trump's attorney, Jay Sekulow, about that in a few minutes. But first, joining us now, it is now the #1 best-selling book in the country, The Russian Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett and Fox News contributor Sarah Carter. Welcome, both of you. I want to get to the Mueller issue. Let's start with the latest news. So Christopher Steele and Bruce Orr are communicating some 70 communications, Sarah, between the two of them.
That's right.
We have the fear of Steele that he's going to be exposed, the desire to keep the firewalls up. He exposes that he expects Orr to deliver messages to Robert Mueller's team. Mm-hmm. And now we find out that Andrew Weissman was the one getting the messages. In other words, Steele's lies, Steele's unverified Russian Hillary Clinton bought and paid for lies being fed to Andrew Weissman. And we never knew about it till now?
Well, and now it makes sense, Sean, because when we go back to the story, remember April 11th, 2017, Weissman set up a meeting with the AP. And remember, that was all a day before the AP broke their big story on Manafort. And because of that meeting, the FBI actually reported that problem to the DOJ and said, Andrew Weissman set up a meeting with the AP to share information against our wishes, and we're afraid he's going to tear down our case. Now, the AP said they never shared anything with Weissman, and that Weissman denies sharing anything with the AP. But now it makes sense. He was being fed information by Bruce Orr the whole time, and he was moving Steele's information possibly to Mueller. I mean, we don't know that yet. It's alleged. But then remember, it was just only a month after that meeting with the AP that he was appointed to the special counsel and became Robert Mueller's right-hand guy.
But Orr is getting messages from Steele about Steele asking Orr to push his information, never verified, never, to the special counsel. Let me get Greg in. Andrew Weissman.
Weissman is like the detective who frames a suspect, then appoints himself the investigator to determine whether the suspect he framed committed crimes.
That's Andrew Weissman. What about Robert Mueller? How can you ever trust a Mueller investigation that appoints a guy, loses 9-0 in the Supreme Court, excoriated by a judge withholding exculpatory evidence, puts innocent people in jail? That's overturned. 9-0 Supreme Court, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. How does this guy get a job with Robert Mueller's office?
He shouldn't have had the job. Mueller should have asked a lot of questions and didn't of Peter Strzok and Andrew Weissman. You've got Strzok who tainted the evidence. You've got Weissman who tainted the evidence. You've got a team of partisans appointed by Mueller who refused to recuse himself, not to mention his boss, who has a disqualifying conflict of interest. This is the most corrupt and tainted investigation of my lifetime, and I'm 63 years old, and it probably
old, by the way.
goes beyond my lifetime.
Sarah has a much longer
She's a
career
kid.
ahead of herself. Let me ask you, but Mueller, all right, let me ask this. Mueller said, New York Times breaking report tonight, that he might accept written answers. Let me go to Greg on the legal side of it first.
Well, this is a victory for President Trump's legal team, but mostly it's a vindication of the rule of law. There was never any legal basis for questioning the president about exercising his constitutional authority. There's no legal justification for asking him questions about a non-crime called collusion. So I think Mueller finally concluded the obvious, that if I slap him with a subpoena, the president is going to file a motion to quash, and I, Robert Mueller, will lose in the federal courts. The brilliance of being able to answer questions that are written is, one, you can object to them and decline to answer certain ones that are inappropriate.
It seems that if they want to present questions, they can.
Well, you can carefully craft your answers to avoid the perjury trap.
Well, that's the thing. And
key here.
Would you recommend he does it? That the president and his legal team answer this?
I would answer the first question about so-called collusion as, I don't know anything about collaborating with Russians.
I don't think they should do anything for the Mueller team. Nothing for this team.
Well, I would answer, say, I don't know anything about it, period. And if they ask follow-up questions, same answer as before. That's what you write down.
Sarah, seriously, knowing all we know and the fact that nobody gets in trouble, the lies that were presented, a fraud committed on the FISA court, Hillary's fixed investigation, so many unanswered questions, the start of this whole investigation is set up from the beginning, the highest levels of power being corrupt. I don't think they should do a thing.
I don't think they should do a thing either, Sean. And I think this is going to be an explosive week. There's a lot of information I'm hearing from Capitol Hill, information that will come out this week. Remember, we still are looking for the 20 pages that the House Intelligence Committee has asked on the FISA warrant. That should be coming out. At least that's what I'm hearing. And there's a lot of information, exculpatory information, that's going to come out. I think the president should hold tight. I think it's going to be within days.
All right. When Sarah says that, that usually means it's coming. Good to see you both. We have a jam-packed lineup for you tonight. When we come back, the president's attorney, Jay Sekulow. Also tonight, Alan Dershowitz, Andy McCarthy, Jessica. We got a chock-full night. Colin Kaepernick even, straight ahead. Or at least talking about him.
This is exactly where you need to be. This is exactly the time you need to be there. And I am telling President Trump, you do some things that drive me crazy. You do some great things. You have never done anything better, in my view, than to pick Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, because you had an opportunity to put well-qualified conservatives on the court, men steeped in the rule of law, who will apply analysis, not politics, to their decision-making, and you knocked it out of the park into my friends on the other side. You can't lose the election and pick judges. If you want to pick judges, you better win.
Oh, Obama used to tell us that. Lindsey Graham hammering Senate Democrats for their outrageous behavior at today's hearing. Also breaking tonight, the New York Times reporting Robert Mueller will accept some written answers from the president. Does this mean the investigation is going to come to an end ever? Finally, nearly 500 days. Here to weigh in on all of this is the president's attorney, also the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, who has done legal work for me in the past, and we actually broke bread together. And met and talked once about sports. Good to see you. How are you? Let's start with
Sean. Good.
You've argued before the Supreme Court personally, what, 12 times?
Yep.
The ACLJ 20 times?
Yep.
And you won most of your cases, right?
We've been very fortunate, very blessed in that regard. You don't win them all, but we've won an overwhelming majority. And if you include the others you mentioned, we've had a number of cases that have been summarily reversed. We've had a good track record. But look, I've also won these cases. Some of them we've won unanimously, a number of them unanimously. It depends on the nature of the case. But I got to tell you something. The president has made two fantastic picks. Neil Gorsuch, tremendous judge, now justice. Brett Kavanaugh, who I've known for a long time, is brilliant, is a great judge. And if you want to know anything about Brett Kavanaugh, read his 312 opinions. That may be a good way to start. So you saw theatrics today. in the Senate. But at the end of the day, guess what happens? Judge Kavanaugh becomes Justice Kavanaugh and is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the president gave a great selection with both of these justices. I mean, and reshaping the court literally for decades with a conservative judicial philosophy. Lindsey Graham said it, elections in that context have consequences. And here the selection of Brett Kavanaugh is, I think, is probably the most qualified
really sad
judge out there for this position.
That the orchestration that went on today, those two young girls that went into the courtroom, that they had to watch their dad go through that process. Nearly said it. I was really careful. All right, let me move on.
But Brett Kavanaugh's opening statement, though, Sean, I thought Brett Kavanaugh's opening statement and what the president tweeted out about what was going on in the Senate kind of summed it all up. Are these senators really going to tangle with Brett Kavanaugh? Because let me tell you who wins that one. Brett Kavanaugh.
I think it's a fait accompli. It's interesting to watch. New York Times headline: Mueller will accept some written answers for Trump. It's been a number of weeks since you and your legal team responded to the special counsel. Some were wondering if there's going to be a fight, whether they would subpoena the president. May still happen. Tell us what you can about what this means. And I know there's only so much you can say.
Yeah, and I've got to be obviously very careful. So let me tell you this. We have an ongoing dialogue with the Office of Special Counsel. Myself and our colleagues have continued an ongoing dialogue. That dialogue continues. I'm not going to discuss the contents of what has been agreed to or not agreed to, but I will tell you this. I'm not concerned about the President of the United States responding, if we decide to accept the proposition of responding to written questions, responding to questions about Russia and interference with the election. The president is committed. There's no crime here. There's no underlying crime that the president was involved in. I'm not concerned about where that goes. Look, I mean, if they ask questions and we think they're appropriate, we would respond. Again, we haven't even responded to the special counsel's
but the White House counsel
response to our letter. But it's
the White House counsel spent 30 hours testifying before, which to me is mind blowing. But it seems to me that if, in fact, Don McGahn gave him 30 hours, and if the president were to go in and say one thing contradictory to what McGahn said, that then sets him up for a perjury trap. And every lawyer...
Well, you're jumping way ahead of the discussion to go to what happens if there was an interview or not an interview. But what you said is very important. This White House has been the most transparent in history when it comes to investigations or inquiries like this. You mentioned Don McGahn's 30 hours of testimony. There's been 30 other witnesses that the White House put forward to testify. There's been over 1.4 million pages of documents that have gone forward. So the idea that the special counsel has not been given access to information, I think they would be readily admit that this has been a transparent investigation and a transparent inquiry. There's all this media spin going on about what was said or what wasn't said, but let me tell you this. The President of the United States authorized his legal team, both his White House counsel and his private lawyers, to engage this in a transparent basis, and that's been done. This does need to come to an end. I mean, I think everybody in the country wants this to come to an end. I don't give dates and times. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. But look, at the end of the day, as I said, it's a process of negotiation. It's ongoing. I'm not going to disclose the nature of that. But there's been a lot of speculation in the media today. I will tell you this much. Look at what has happened so far and what the number of documents and the number of witnesses that have gone forward.
Do we have to worry about what John Dowd has said publicly on this network, or say what we reported about Andrew Weissman and back channel information from Christopher Steele and text messages and communications that show that, in fact, Christopher Steele was trying to funnel information to the special counsel?
Well, look, my former colleague John Dowd denied unequivocally today the reports that came in regarding the excerpts of the book that were released regarding a purported meeting that he had and I had regarding they called it basically a reenactment of a conversation that never took place. And John said that was not correct, that did not happen, and it did not happen. With regard to the other issues you brought up, the irregularities in this inquiry from the outset, including the beginning of it, which is the dossier issue, which starts the whole thing, of course that's an issue. I can give you a whole list. We don't have the time to go through that again. Yeah. But look, all of that's relevant to the nature and the scope of this inquiry, and it's just resolution. At the end of the day, as I said, I am convinced that we're going to get it there. We're going to end this soon, but I don't give dates. But I will tell you this. I'm not worried about questions on Russia.
Okay, Jay Sekulow. It'll be interesting to see if this becomes, if you will, James Comey 2, weeks before an election. Thanks for being with us. When we come back, powerful analysis, Alan Dershowitz, Andy McCarthy, and the latest, Colin Kaepernick, now the face of Nike. Just do it? Let's remind you about Colin Kaepernick. Jesse and Jessica, straight ahead. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Andy McCarthy. Mueller will accept some written answers from Trump. Professor Dershowitz.
Well, I think it's an attempt to achieve a compromise. The written answers will be vetted by his lawyers, and President Trump is not going to be allowed to just go off on a tangent and state his opinions on the state of the world. He's going to be answering yes, no, I don't remember, and lawyer-like answers. That seems like a perfectly reasonable resolution. But if they ask him, even in writing, what was your motive when you fired Comey, he has every right to say, none of your business, executive privilege, Article 2, right. You have no right to probe my state of mind when I engage in a constitutionally protected act.
The idea that we try and criminalize thoughts has always bothered me, whether it be hate crimes legislation. In the case of James Byrd, that became a big issue in 2000. George Bush supported the death penalty for the people that committed that evil atrocity. But people said, well, he didn't support the hate crimes legislation. It didn't make sense to me. Andy, is it a bad idea or a good compromise for the White House to give written answers? Most lawyers have been saying anything else is a perjury trap. And this, some say, could even be a perjury trap.
Well, Sean, it could be, but the president has very good lawyers, and what Professor Dershowitz has just laid out is about as good advice as there could be. The answer to the questions from an inferior executive official about what the chief executive's motivation was in carrying out his constitutional prerogatives is Article 2. If that's the answers that the president gives, then I don't really see the jeopardy for him.
So what is the point if Don McGahn gives 30 hours to the special counsel? And I think this is the point Rudy made, that the media was all over, Professor. Truth is not necessarily the truth. But if there's a contradiction or a different recollection, then the special counsel will be the one that decides what the truth is. And we kind of know that the team that they put together is kind of predisposed to hating Trump. They probably would believe Don McGahn, no matter what was said.
There isn't a single experienced criminal lawyer who wouldn't agree with the thrust of what Giuliani said. They would have put it differently, but they would have said the same thing. That is, even if you say something that is absolutely the truth and you pass a lie detector test and you get some sleazy, flipped witness who's been threatened with his family going to jail unless he composes or sings, nonetheless, you can be charged with lying if they have one witness who contradicts what you said. And that's why when he said the truth isn't the truth, that's essentially what he meant. And every criminal defense lawyer and prosecutor who's honest and experienced will tell you the same thing. That's why people don't go and speak to prosecutors. Ask Martha Stewart what happened when she did.
Such a good point. Andy, this is a sad commentary because my family was law enforcement. My mom was a prison guard, many New York City cops. Two guys were deity. They made the FBI. But I have FBI friends of mine that say, never talk to the FBI. And I'm like, why not? Why would I'd want to help them? That would be my natural instinct. If you ever do and you say something and it turns out to be wrong, bad recollection, look at General Flynn. Look at Papadopoulos. It's like Professor Dershowitz has always said, we're criminalizing political differences. Sometimes you don't honestly remember something, and you can now be charged with a crime of lying to the FBI. So my friends in the FBI tell me, never talk to the FBI. That's ridiculous to me that we now live in that circumstance.
Well, Sean, I think that in still 99% of the cases, cooperating with the FBI is a perfectly fine idea. What you have here is a case where not only because you have an impeachment overlay, but just the nature of the investigation, the politics has really overwhelmed the law, and it makes it a very eccentric, different kind of case.
Professor, your answer to that question.
Okay, if you want to cooperate with the FBI, do it through your lawyer. Do not speak to them directly. Tell your lawyer what you think, then your lawyer can honestly relate what you told him to the FBI. That avoids any possibility
Don't you think
of
it's
perjury
sad, Professor,
or lying
though,
to the
that
FBI.
we're at
It
that
is.
point? It's sad to me.
Look, we shouldn't have a statute like 1001 that makes it a crime for anybody to lie to the FBI. You should have to swear under oath on a Bible before you can be charged with perjury, because the vast majority of Americans don't know that. Don't know that if you tell a traffic cop in some states, oh, I was speeding because my wife's pregnant, or I was taking my kid back from a soccer game, and it isn't true, you've committed a crime. The oath is very important, and it should be a prerequisite for perjury.
I think that's well said. Andy, you seem to disagree.
See, Sean, it's...
Yeah.
There's no problem cooperating with the FBI as long as your lawyer is Alan Dershowitz.
Listen, but my instinct is to help the FBI. 99% of them protect and serve us. All right, good to see you both. When we come back, a Hannity monologue. Nike makes Colin Kaepernick the new face of the company. Tommy Lahren asked people in California what they think. Also reaction, Jessica, whose world? We'll find out straight ahead. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Andy McCarthy. Mueller will accept some written answers from Trump. Professor Dershowitz.
Well, I think it's an attempt to achieve a compromise. The written answers will be vetted by his lawyers, and President Trump is not going to be allowed to just go off on a tangent and state his opinions on the state of the world. He's going to be answering yes, no, I don't remember, and lawyer-like answers. That seems like a perfectly reasonable resolution. But if they ask him, even in writing, what was your motive when you fired Comey, he has every right to say, none of your business, executive privilege, Article 2, right. You have no right to probe my state of mind when I engage in a constitutionally protected act.
The idea that we try and criminalize thoughts has always bothered me, whether it be hate crimes legislation. In the case of James Byrd, that became a big issue in 2000. George Bush supported the death penalty for the people that committed that evil atrocity. But people said, well, he didn't support the hate crimes legislation. It didn't make sense to me. Andy, is it a bad idea or a good compromise for the White House to give written answers? Most lawyers have been saying anything else is a perjury trap. And this, some say, could even be a perjury trap.
Well, Sean, it could be, but the president has very good lawyers, and what Professor Dershowitz has just laid out is about as good advice as there could be. The answer to the questions from an inferior executive official about what the chief executive's motivation was in carrying out his constitutional prerogatives is Article 2. If that's the answers that the president gives, then I don't really see the jeopardy for him.
So what is the point if Don McGahn gives 30 hours to the special counsel? And I think this is the point Rudy made, that the media was all over, Professor. Truth is not necessarily the truth. But if there's a contradiction or a different recollection, then the special counsel will be the one that decides what the truth is. And we kind of know that the team that they put together is kind of predisposed to hating Trump. They probably would believe Don McGahn, no matter what was said.
There isn't a single experienced criminal lawyer who wouldn't agree with the thrust of what Giuliani said. They would have put it differently, but they would have said the same thing. That is, even if you say something that is absolutely the truth and you pass a lie detector test and you get some sleazy, flipped witness who's been threatened with his family going to jail unless he composes or sings, nonetheless, you can be charged with lying if they have one witness who contradicts what you said. And that's why when he said the truth isn't the truth, that's essentially what he meant. And every criminal defense lawyer and prosecutor who's honest and experienced will tell you the same thing. That's why people don't go and speak to prosecutors. Ask Martha Stewart what happened when she did.
Such a good point. You know, Andy, this is a sad commentary because my family was law enforcement. My mom was a prison guard, many New York City cops. Two guys were deity. They made the FBI. But I have FBI friends of mine that say, never talk to the FBI. And I'm like, why not? Why would I'd want to help them? That would be my natural instinct. If you ever do and you say something and it turns out to be wrong, bad recollection, look at General Flynn. Look at Papadopoulos. It's like Professor Dershowitz has always said, we're criminalizing political differences. Sometimes you don't honestly remember something, and you can now be charged with a crime of lying to the FBI. So my friends in the FBI tell me, never talk to the FBI. That's ridiculous to me that we now live in that circumstance.
Well, Sean, I think that in still 99% of the cases, cooperating with the FBI is a perfectly fine idea. What you have here is a case where not only because you have an impeachment overlay, but just the nature of the investigation, the politics has really overwhelmed the law, and it makes it a very eccentric, different kind of case.
Professor, your answer to that question.
Okay, if you want to cooperate with the FBI, do it through your lawyer. Do not speak to them directly. Tell your lawyer what you think, then your lawyer can honestly relate what you told him to the FBI. That avoids any possibility of perjury.
Don't you think it's sad, Professor, though, that we're at that point? It's sad to me.
Look, we shouldn't have a statute like 1001 that makes it